Thank you for coming. I am thrilled to welcome those of you in the hall and those of you at home. Thank you for joining us on our Made Local series to celebrate the Pittsburgh launch. Finally, it's now the launch of the paperback. We're so happy to welcome Jen Spyra with Big Time. Hello, I'm Stephanie Flom, Executive Director of Pittsburgh Arts and Lectures, and on behalf of Pittsburgh Arts and Lectures and our wonderful program partner whose house we're in, Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, let's hear it for them. Welcome. Pittsburgh Arts and Lectures will be back in the Music Hall in September as we launch our 10-evening series with Nobel Prize winner Abdulrazak Gurna. In-person and virtual subscriptions are available. We hope you'll join us. A shout out to White Whale Bookstore, who is here with signed copies of Big Time. There's a chance that they may run out of books, but do not despair. They will help you with an online order, and they will provide you with free shipping if you order tonight and a signed bookplate. Jen is happy to personalize your books or your bookplate after the lecture. We'll start the signing line right here, and our staff will be happy to help you. Jen will be in conversation with Matt Weiss, a bona fide, fun history teacher at Shadyside Academy. Who knows Matt? He is also the voice of Pittsburgh Thunderbirds' ultimate Frisbee team. Any Frisbee players here? And a big-time fan of Big Time. Sorry. I'll leave the jokes to the pros. So speaking of people who are fun and funny, introducing Jen Spyra is Shannon Reed. Shannon is a Thurber Prize semi-finalist in American humor for her hilarious and poignant book, Why Did I Get a B+? And other mysteries we're discussing in the faculty lounge. A native of Johnstown, Shannon is a lecturer in the creative writing program at the University of Pittsburgh and has been published in the New Yorker, McSweeney's, the Paris Review, the Washington Post, Slate, BuzzFeed, and many other publications. Please welcome Shannon Reed.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here. Many thanks to Stephanie and the entire Pittsburgh Arts and Lectures team. I was so honored to be part of the Maine Local series 2 years ago. We're so lucky to have these folks in literary Pittsburgh. I was delighted to be asked to introduce Jen Spyra, who has some amazing credits. From serving as senior writer for The Onion, to performing and writing for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, to published work in The New Yorker, The New York Times, and McSweeney's, among others. And of course, she is the author of the short story collection, Big Time, which has won raves from a few people you may have heard of, like Tina Fey, Jack Handy, and Mindy Kaling. I encountered Jen's written work for the first time when asked to review Big Time for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And of course, I fell in love with her hilarious body and unique voice, and the stories she told with it. In my review, I wrote, "These stories are absolutely hilarious. For those who want to laugh, and I mean full on, put it down and slump over on the couch guffaws, this is the book for you." It was a perfect pandemic break. What that quote doesn't capture, though, is the seething jealousy I felt after reading the book. How dare this very funny woman write such very funny stories and be from Pittsburgh? I was the very funny woman from Pittsburgh writing funny things. That was my beat. As I see, I began to wonder if she was even from Pittsburgh, or was that a ploy? I never saw her at any of our Funny Women in Pittsburgh meetings. So when asked to introduce Jen tonight, I very politely agreed, but secretly decided to get to the bottom of it by quizzing her about our city. Friends, you will be pleased to know Jen has passed all of my Bergian tests. First, in a classic Berg move, she admitted that she misidentified her own neighborhood as a kid. She actually grew up in Point Breeze, but said she lived in Squirrel Hill until she was a teenager. As someone who lived in Monroeville, but tried repeatedly to claim that I lived in Pittsburgh itself, I understand. Next test, does Jen have a favorite city park? Any real Pittsburgher would. She does. It's Mellon Park, which is not the best park, but still, she has one. Final test, would she, unbidden, bring up chipped ham as a delicacy? She would, and she did. Clearly, her yins or creds are all up to date. I'll just have to welcome Jen to the Funny Women from Pittsburgh Brigade, a small but vibrant group. Jen, we meet on Tuesday evenings underneath the T-Rex in the Museum of Natural History, if you'd like to join us. Please make sure to bring 24 pierogies for sharing. Anyway, I'm relieved to report that Jen is the real deal. Talented and funny, yes, but also a lovely person, or as lovely as one can be when writing about self-pleasuring snowmen. I'm so delighted that she's here to share her work with us tonight, so let's give a fond Pittsburgh welcome home to Jen Spyra.
Oh my God, please keep it going for Shannon Reed, everybody. Shannon, I was laughing because I didn't even tell you this, which makes me so small, but I felt the same way about you. I knew your byline, and when I looked you up, I was like, this bitch is from Pittsburgh, and she's funny, and that's me. And so I was mad at you before I met you, but thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for being here tonight. I'd like to start by reading you a story. It's called Dinner at 8, and if it feels a little familiar, it was inspired by the Agatha Christie novel, And Then There Were None, from 1939. So this is Dinner at 8. The mansion sat cliffside on a ragged island in the middle of the Baltic Sea. It was a frightful fortress, with spires that slashed the night sky like daggers, and as lightning struck above, black waves crashed against the rocks below. Inside the library, however, the fire crackled agreeably. I sipped my champagne cocktail and glanced around at the scattered guests, people with whom I had nothing in common but the fact that we'd all been mysteriously summoned by telegram. Devilishly odd, the whole thing. Each of us had received a missive from a Madame Osveta, who claimed to be a long-lost acquaintance. She wired our aeroplane and train reservations, and then we were met at the dock by a swarthy man with the bearing of an ancient sea captain, Spanish by the look of him. He rowed us out one by one from the mainland to the island, and after dressing for dinner, I found myself installed in an armchair, puzzling it all out as I sipped. Silly me, I should have introduced myself. My name is Montclair Ellison, of the Weybridge Ellisons, man about town, member in good standing at Pratt's and the Turf Club, happy resident of Upper Grosvenor Street, W1K, Mayfair. Pop by sometime. Now, the man leaning on the mantel was the Colonel, a stodgy old boy with a bushy mustache and a limp. Not much of a conversationalist, unless you were keen on the minutiae of grouse hunting. Margaret Hadley, the governess, was certainly easy to look at. The Nussbaum fellow chatting her up was obviously a Jew. Besides the name, he had that shifty, money-changery quality. I took another sip of my cocktail as I appraised the unctuous Hebrew. Jews, sticky sort. Then there was Countess Calcott, who appeared to be rather stern, but not Jewish, so fine by me. Suddenly, a fearsome voice cut through the chatter. "Silence!" it bellowed, seemingly from nowhere. "This is your host. You have been gathered here tonight to play a game of vengeance." Shock rippled through the library. Aha! Finally, the reason for our little gathering. Everyone was ill at ease. Miss Hadley clutched her breast. The Colonel took an uneasy sip of his sherry, and the thick-lipped money banker Jew shifted uncomfortably in his seat, as if he suddenly realized he had left a stack of money on the train. The disembodied voice again broke through the silence. But before we move ahead with that, I want to address Montclair's inner monologue. Is anyone else finding it extremely problematic? There were several audible sighs of relief. The Colonel blustered his assent. Margaret Hadley nodded, and the butler tisk-tisked softly. "It's quite outrageous," Hadley said. The Colonel adjusted his monocle. "And apart from its ugliness, it's simply distracting to the storytelling." "Storytelling? You're giving this thing a lot of credit," I said. "I'm just adding a little flavor." Countess Calcott piped up. "Well, young man, your flavor sounds a lot like hate." Miss Hadley raised her glass to Countess Calcott. "Amen. And besides, the dramatic tension of the revenge angle accounts for more than enough flavor." The slippery little Hebrew narrowed his eyes in my direction. He certainly was a Jewish Jew. He rolled his eyes and gestured to me as he looked around at the group. "Come on, this guy's ridiculous," Nussbaum said, continuing to gesture to my person. "I mean to say, who did this bagel eater think he was?" The hour had dawned for a swift correction. I impersonated him effortlessly. "Ooh, look at me. I'm Mr. Israel, policing what's okay to say." "I did not just say that," the Hebrew shouted. "I just want to let the record show that that was Montclair thinking what I would say, which I'm sure we all agree was very offensive." The Colonel rapped on the table. "Quite right, couldn't agree more, and I'm fairly intolerant myself." Enough with Montclair's opinions on the Jewish race. We've strayed from the thrust of the story, which is a mysterious vengeance-themed game leading, quite probably, to murder, Countess Calcott pronounced, fingering her cane. "Montclair, could you please agree to refrain from any unflattering characterizations of Mr. Nussbaum?" She fixed me with a chilly gaze, revealing herself to be a wanton Jew lover and probably a slut. "Okay, that's it," bellowed the disembodied voice. "I'm making a change. Colonel, you're taking the reins." "Gladly," the Colonel replied. The Colonel. The assembled strangers sat in the library, awaiting another address by the fearsome voice. The Jew-hating playboy, Montclair Ellison, scowled, but the rest of the group seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, especially the radiant Miss Margaret Hadley, whose delicate sensibilities the ruffian had offended. I should like to add that, in addition to being a perfect lady, Miss Hadley was extremely physically attractive. Her face was pleasant, her complexion fair, and her jugs were the big round kind, the kind that, if one were to make love to her from behind, would probably swing back and forth and even quite gloriously slap together in a most delicious fashion. "So obviously we're going to have to make another change," interjected the anonymous voice, quite rudely in my opinion. Miss Hadley, whom even a gay man would want to have sex with, blushed, her breasts, again large, round, heaving as she drew in her breath sharply and gestured toward my person. I wish I could say I was surprised, but what did you expect? You asked another old white guy to control the narrative. What the hell did you think was going to happen? Montclair piped up from the banquette where he had been sulking. 39 isn't old. The disembodied voice broke in again. "Let's try Miss Hadley." "With pleasure," said the mouth of the beautiful boobs. Miss Hadley. The all-white group of overprivileged soldiers of the patriarchy reclined by the fire in the sumptuously appointed library, the very picture of casual entitlement. They were all the kind of people who would say they have a black friend, but if you dug into it a little, it would just turn out to be someone they worked with. According to our mysterious host, we were all wanted for the crime of murder. But what about our other crimes, such as the microaggressions we commit every day against groups that for too long have been regarded as other? "Is anyone still awake?" said Montclair, the stupid anti-Semitic asshole whom you'll remember was the first narrator. "I resent that description," this fucking dumbass dickhead continued, stretching his legs out on the ottoman, subjugating the footrest the same way he so casually subjugated Jews, and probably women and minorities. The Colonel cleared his throat nervously. "Speaking for myself, I'd just like to say that while I may be sexist, I am not racist. My mistress is Jamaican, and I think of black women in general as being somehow juicier. See, that right there is racist, though, Mr. Nussbaum said. At least someone here wasn't a typical dumb as shit man. Countess Calcott groaned. Miss Hadley, I'm with you, but don't you see how you lose ground when you disparage the entire male gender? I'm not saying your anger isn't justified, but we've got to go high. It's the only path to progress. Just then, there was a knock on the door. We all looked toward the sound. A collective shiver ran down our spines. Pizza's here, Montclair said, then fell apart laughing at his retarded fucking joke. Suddenly, everyone's eyes were upon me. This time, it was the butler who spoke up. Retarded, miss? He put down the sherry he'd been pouring with a clank. My sister has Down syndrome. Is she retarded? I didn't mean it like that, I stammered. You didn't mean it like what? Didn't mean it like stupid, blathering moron because that's what you think of people who are born with disabilities? The knock came at the door again, but this time no one even noticed, now that we were engrossed in this uncomfortable but vital conversation about how we speak of the differently abled, the phrase I would have employed if I hadn't been so distracted by that smarmy little shitbag Montclair. The colonel cleared his throat and addressed the butler delicately. With the greatest respect, sir, perhaps Miss Hadley hadn't realized that the term to which you took offense had become outmoded. I myself have found that these terms change so frequently that it can be difficult keeping up with them. Breasts big right there. I mean, you all see them, right? The butler rolled his eyes, and a moment later we heard another knock at the door. Maybe someone should answer that, the disembodied voice announced hesitantly. I could feel my face flush, the way it does when I'm nervous. Colonel, I do know better, I said, then turned to face the butler head on, to continue this dialogue in a respectful, thoughtful manner. Sir, please. The disembodied voice. No one was answering my knock at the door, and frankly, I was starting to become uneasy. I had placed the captain's dead body, the Spaniard who rode my guest to the mansion, in the library behind the velvet curtains in front of the window. It had been easy to club him over the head with his oar after he delivered the last guest, and then, using a small dolly I had stowed by the dock, roll his body to the house while everyone was dressing for dinner. I'd left instructions for the butler to open the curtains at exactly 8 o'clock, ostensibly to air out the library. In actuality, this step was designed only to reveal my gruesome handiwork and provide my guests with their first clue. I'd scrawled the letters OSVETA on the captain's forehead in blood. Osveta is Croatian for vengeance, a word that hammers home the vengeance theme and hopefully adds to their growing sense of doom. But checking my pocket watch, I saw that it was already 8:15. The butler had missed his cue by a long shot, so now I was knocking on the door, and still the servant did not come to answer it. I twirled my mustache anxiously. The bees were to be released in the dining room at precisely 25 after. I needed to get this show on the road. So I began to wonder, should I simply open the door myself, stride over to the curtains, and pull them back to reveal the captain's course, and then say something like, "Behold your fate"? "We can all hear this," Montclair said, "and I'll have you know I came armed." Countess Calcott plucked a pistol from her boot. "I'm armed myself, and a decorated markswoman at that." Shit, I thought. Just then, from my vantage point through the keyhole, I saw the chandelier flicker. Everyone looked toward the light as it sputtered off completely, casting the library into blackness. Now what? I thought. This wasn't part of the plan. A great scuffle ensued. I pressed my eye right up to the opening, but all I could make out in the darkness were shadows and muffled clobberings, a piercing shriek, a yell, a moan. Then the lights blinked back on, and to my horror, I saw everyone, each of my hand-picked guests, my pawns, playthings, lying dead on the floor. Montclair's monocle was shattered and bloody. The Countess was crammed at an odd angle against the grandfather clock, her head perpendicular to her body. As I fumbled in my breast pocket for the keys, the keyhole darkened with an approaching figure. I scrambled back, sliding down the marble hallway, just as the door creaked slowly open and the swarthy captain, bloody but alive, stepped through and made his way toward me with a menacing grin. The captain. The squirmy little coward gaped up at me, his eyes full of terror as I lifted the candelabra high above his stupid, eccentric millionaire head. I'm not a Spaniard, I said, bringing the hardware down with a wet thwack. I'm Basque. Learn the difference. Thank you so much. Thank you. Matt, Mr. Weiss, please come out and join me.
So I see you decided to split the difference between Matt and Mr. Weiss.
I did. I wanted to just do Matt, and then it felt so wrong.
Yeah, I know. You're not the only one. You're relieved to know. That's a hard thing to do. And I wanted to let you know, since you said you sometimes get back to town, it's not an unusual thing for me to get together with former students. We usually would just like pick Panera or something. This is a little more ambitious.
Yeah.
But we can do that next time, or we can do an HBO special, whatever you want to do.
Both sound good.
I like it.
I love
I'm very
Panera.
flexible. So, first of all, well, welcome back. Welcome home.
Thank you.
Is it fun to be home?
Thank you. It really is. Oh, I love being in Pittsburgh. I love home.
Well, and it's wonderful to have you back. And I was so glad that you decided to read Dinner at 8. It's one of my favorites. And when you mentioned that it was inspired by And Then There Were None, I wondered if you've also seen the 1976 film Murder by Death. Anybody know Murder by Death?
No.
Peter Sellers, Peter Falk was in it. It's a wonderful Agatha Christie send-up. I will spring for the $3.99 rental on Prime.
Oh my
You should
God.
watch the movie. I wanted to ask you. We're going to start a little bit with the book, but then we got to talk a little bit about Jen Spyra, and then we're going to get back to big time because we have some sections that we both want the audience to hear because people seem to enjoy that story, and there is more, so we want to get to it. But I wonder, you told me that you got into this line of work as a performer first.
Yes.
So I wonder if some of that breaking the fourth wall came from that. Do you think that had to do with your life in improv?
Well, absolutely. And breaking the fourth wall, yeah. And I think the biggest thing, though, is is heightening, which is the thing that you learn in improv, because really that's like the one strategy that you learn to succeed when you're doing improvised comedy, is just to find the game and heighten it. So that is almost, it's really close to, I find the writing is so like improv. It reminds me of it. And that piece specifically was so about just a game occurring to me, which is I was actually listening to that book on tape. Tommy and I, my husband and I, happened to be in England, and we were listening to it, and really early on she makes this like left turn, and there's a description of a character, and it's so brutally anti-Semitic, and it so takes you out of the story. And that just made me think of, oh yeah, like that's supposed to be a kind of neutral narrator, but it's not neutral at all. And what if there was a narrator that was just getting in his or her way? And so then that game occurred to me, and then you've just got to play it and heighten it, and that's totally just from improv.
So that's how it happened. There's this, you had that little seed, and a 1939 description or a narrator would not be a neutral narrator by 2020 standards.
Absolutely, and I mean,
then you end up with this raging anti-Semite character, and then he gets kicked off the spot. And there's something else that you did there that I think, it's another layer, right? Obviously, we've got two obvious targets, right? First with Montclair, and then the Colonel. And then Miss Hadley, who you refer to just so delightfully as the mouth of the beautiful boobs, she starts to speak, and then she's giving voice to this. There's this whole other direction you take the mockery, and then she gets hoisted on her own petard. I mean, that's a conscious choice of yours to kind of, she's a different kind of target. She's too PC, too woke, would we call her? Right.
Well, she slips, but that slip up that's a major word that someone who was as PC as she was really wouldn't use. So I had to kind of be a little bit sloppy there, because I don't think she would really use the R word. But yeah, I mean, I just was like, I liked that game, and the first two were very easy. Okay, someone who's super anti-Semitic, someone who's super sexist, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to keep playing this game for more beats, and I needed a PC person to slip up.
But the thing I like about that is because I think that it's a lot of us occupy this space where we know what we should say, and we all recognize a legitimate need to be careful, but at the same time we all are worried that we're gonna. I mean, I know as somebody who talks for a living in front of kids who listen some of whom listen to everything I say, that you know, you can say the wrong thing and that can land you in a world of trouble, and it can be exactly the opposite of what you feel. And so I felt like I could relate to her in that moment. I thought that she was she was everybody then.
Good. I'm so glad, because yeah, I mean that's like the shifting plates of what is right to say. I mean, it changes, and the tension around that, and seeing people try and mess up is really funny.
The tension between our inner voices and what we know, you know, because so much of what you do is giving voice to that id, that rampaging id. You know.
Yeah.
Shannon said, you know, the self-pleasuring snowman. I want to ask you about this choice that you made. You went and you wrote a book,
Mm-hmm.
Spyra, in a world now, a comedic environment where, you know, you've got Twitter, you've got tweets that are limited to 280 characters. I think there are probably at least twice as many characters in big time, and you've got Reels and TikTok and all of that. And to me, you went and resurrected a genre that I learned to love when I was young, the book of comedic short stories. What were you thinking?
Yeah,
Please.
no,
I hate to say it.
but you're okay. You're so right that comedic short stories are like was so much worse than the red-headed stepchild of literature. I mean, when you go to a bookstore, if there's a humor section, which isn't, you know, there's not necessarily going to be a humor section. First of all, I hope this isn't in the humor section. I hope it would just be in the normal section, because the humor section's super weird. Like, the books are different sizes, some are furry, some have stuff on the cover, you know. But yeah, I mean, I just have always been a huge fan of short story collections that are putting humor really out there. And I mean, I just was like, I wanna. It didn't occur to me immediately. I just was a fan, and I didn't think I was gonna do one myself. But when you write for other people, then starting to write on my own was kind of like a cathartic little release.
And we did want to talk about that, and we will later come back to that. But I did want to ask you about some of your influences and your models for those sorts of books. I mean,
Oh
I
my
remember
God.
when I was young, reading, although he's understandably and justifiably controversial now, Woody Allen. But the first time I opened Getting Even, and the thing that I loved about it was that it looked like a book. It just had a black cover and it had white lettering on it. But books were supposed to be serious, and it was anything but. And I thought, this is almost subversive.
Totally.
So who were the ones that you read that inspired you to write big time?
Totally. Well, the first time I had your experience of seeing a book and being like, I didn't even know it could ever be like this, was just reading pointless, evergreen comedy on McSweeney. Someone told me senior year of college, there's this website, you'd love it. And I just went, it's like 800, 900 word pieces, totally pointless. They're just supposed to be fun. And I was like, I didn't even know that existed. This type of stuff, I mean, so I discovered McSweeney's first, and then that led me to collections, like all the collections that Simon Rich has done, Jack Handy's collections. Actually, there's this one book Jon Stewart did before he did The Daily Show called Naked Pictures of Famous People. I always recommend it to people.
I have read it.
It's good. There's like I would point to, like, there's 3 different ones in there. Some of them it's so dated from like 1993. It's really pop culture-y, but the ones that aren't tied to 1993 are amazing. And yeah, those and I mean, David Sedaris's fiction before he went to memoir. Barrel Fever, exactly.
Mind, right?
I love Barrel
Because
Fever.
He's now famous enough so that he can make himself the subject, like, you know, Tina Fey, who blurbed your book, which
Yeah.
we're going to buy, right? Because we know everybody here was comped. This isn't the Fancy Lecture series, right? So nobody has an excuse, and you can get one signed. So how often can you do that? But you know, like Tina Fey's book, Bossy Pants. Tina, it's
so
wonderful.
good,
But
yeah.
we all know Tina, so we want to read about Tina.
Yeah.
And Barrel Fever was before that, and so he had to be funny, you know, using stuff that came to him. He couldn't use the you know, his life as Christopher the Mill.
Yeah, he only had Santaland Diaries. That was the only essay in there that was memoir. The rest was fiction. And sadly, I know that he like disavows it now. I think he thinks it's not funny now, which I find so disappointing.
I beg to differ.
Yeah, me too.
Let me ask you about how you came to this, because, you know, I know you going back a long way. You were a kid. I was a teacher, and you were a fun, vibrant, you know, really engaged, charming person. I knew you as that. but you weren't like holding impromptu comedy jam throwdowns. Like you weren't the class clown.
No.
And I wonder when it occurred to you that you were going to be professionally funny, and how did you go about doing that?
Totally. I mean, yeah, I wasn't a class clown, although but I found this to be so typical among my friends who work in comedy that most of them were not the class clowns. They just were quiet and made sarcastic comments to their friends.
And I imagine that with your friends like Ella and Barry, that you were
Yes.
funny with them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, making fun of stuff. That was the way that, but like every other kid, movies that you think are funny, and you only have the confidence to parrot things that are accepted, and so you say the funny thing that Adam Sandler said, and that's how you get into that. But I feel like I meet so many kids right now that are like in college, and you can like major in comedy now. It's like normal. They have comedy programs in like undergrads. I didn't know, it didn't occur to me, it was such an incremental occurring that you could have any kind of job in comedy. It was like, at first I moved to Chicago to do improv comedy. It wasn't clear what job could come from that, and then it was like, I think you have to, being on SNL was the only thing I was even like aware of. I didn't even know, I just didn't think about this stuff. And then, eventually, I knew about The Onion, and then I started to get so jealous. I would hear podcasts of people talk about writing on it, and I would just be so jealous, and I was like, I'd love to do that, and eventually I just wormed my way in there, and then you go from there to like TV. That was very clearly the route.
I think a lot of us think that. Anybody who has pretensions to being funny thinks that, but you just went ahead and did it. I mean, did you just show up at the Onion in Madison, Wisconsin, and said, "Here, I want to be funny here"? How do you do it?
You know, the way you do it is not really the way that I did it, because I got with both The Onion and Colbert, I got so lucky, because the way you do with The Onion is you kind of hang around forever, and you're their intern, and then you're their contributor, and so you get on a list, and then you send in headlines, and you do that for years, and then of those contributors, they will audition a few people to be fellows, and fellows are basically full-time staff writers that they don't really pay, and it's an audition to work there full-time. And almost no one that I knew got in the way I did, which is like I applied never knowing them, and someone was like, send in headlines and they're gonna hire fellows, and they just hired me from the thing that I sent, and I didn't have to do the like thing.
The getting coffee.
Yeah. I mean, but that
It is amazing how much of the world runs on unpaid labor.
Oh yeah.
It's disturbing.
It's pretty wrong. It's
But
unfair.
Be that as it may, that's not a funny segue, but we'll just escape from that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to come back to Big Time and talk about some of the things that you do in the book. One theme that comes up for me consistently is the way that you write about women and for these women characters. I wanted there are kind of two contrasting voices that I want to get into. The first one shows up in I think it's Bride Body, and then also again in Birthday Girl, which is, tell us a little bit about what Birthday Girl is. Give us the 30-second treatment, and then I'm going to have you read a little bit from it.
Oh, okay.
Because the narrator is just wonderful. And
my God.
I think that she kind of captures the way that you deal with one aspect of being a woman.
Yeah. I mean, Birthday Girl is, I guess, the style of that character is one that I like to use. I guess it's kind of like Happy Idiot, the confident idiot, which really I'm just stealing from, like, I used to intern and PA for Conan and work for Stephen Colbert, and that's their brand. I mean, they are these like happy idiots. And so it's something I've been a fan of, and then I like to write in that style. The story is about a woman who attends her best friend's 34th destination birthday party on an island, and she's
a long history of destination birthday parties. They are compulsory attendance and beyond anyone's wildest imagination.
Exactly. The girl who takes us through the story is kind of like this sweet, losery kind of girl, and she's totally in awe of her best friend who's larger than life, and we should add, literally murderously abusive as well. Yeah, that's
and
right.
So I wanted to, if we can there's this moment, because you talk about the kind of happy, confident idiot, right? But there's another dimension to it in that she really also has to be completely complicit in her own, subjugation.
Yeah, no, oh yeah, she's so internalized kind of misogynistic stuff that she just feels cheerful about everything.
Can I hand you your own book to read here? I marked a spot for you. Could you read the part where she is on the private plane and they're on their way to the destination wedding, which is going to conclude with a wild party in a volcano.
Yeah.
And she's thinking about what's coming up, and she's a little apprehensive. And I have gone ahead and started for you, so go ahead.
Thank you, Matthew. Amazing. Okay. I took a contemplative sip of my tea. To tell you the truth, I was feeling a little uneasy about this invitation. It wasn't the money for the Airbnb or the plane or anything. That stuff can all go on plastic. Sure, I'm still paying for Molly's last 7 birthdays, and those interest rates are no joke. But the memories are worth a few dings on my credit score. I wasn't even super concerned about the fact that nowhere on the invitation did it ask about allergies, since I have a nut one that is, annoying I know, life-threatening. No, the part that worried me was that the island part screamed bikini. I wouldn't describe myself as beach bod ready in any time of year, but if I can have about a month's notice, I can generally straighten myself out enough to feel good in a one-piece. But according to some smaller print near the bottom of the invitation, the helicopter to the private airfield left at midnight, which didn't leave me a heck of a lot of time to pack and scoot over to New York, let alone whip myself into bikini shape. That's it, right?
I think that gets us started. So here she, and by the way, one of the first things that happens to her on the plane is that she's served an exotic Diet Coke that's almond infused. So
right, because her friend is trying to kill her.
The first attempt on her life. And just so you'll know, the subtitle of the story, a little bit of a spoiler alert, is there can only be one.
Oh, God, yeah.
But I'm not going to give away any more because, as we know, all of these folks are going to be owners of this book and reading it.
That's right. Suffice it to say, there's a monkey-human war that ensues.
Yeah, and you can't opt out. You can't be neutral.
No.
So she, here she is. She's confronting crippling debt, a friend who is clearly intent on, if not murdering her, and she is. She clearly has no love for her. She's just a sycophant, and all of these friends are obviously sycophants. But what she's worried about is that she's not going to fit into her bikini.
Yeah.
And I think it's the first story in the book, is it Bride Body?
Yeah.
Yes, this woman, excited again in the same voice almost for her wedding, but she knows she doesn't have the body that she wants. And where does she end up?
Well, she ends up at a gulag, essentially. It's a volunteer work camp to get her bridal body, and 7 winters pass. And by the time she looks amazing when she leaves, but by the time she leaves, her fiance is remarried with sons, and it's like a yeah.
And it's funny because she looks amazing, but I think it's probably amazing in a more shocking way, because my sense is that at that point she's just simply bone and leather. She survived
right.
with, constant beatings, and
right.
And one of the training things I think is that you have to push a giant boulder up the side of a valley, and then it rolls back down, and you have to do it again, and you have to do it for several years.
That's
and then
right.
Somebody beats the hell out of you.
Exactly.
But that's the price you have to pay for this body. It's not subtle, but go ahead and translate the message for us. What's behind all of that?
I mean, that was just because I fell into this trap that that I know so many people do before their wedding, where I was like, okay, like as an experiment, I'm just going to see how hot can I get? How far could I go? And I was like, I was going all these different classes, like workout classes, and I was like feeling like, oh, I'm wasting so much time doing this, and I wanted to get some material out of it. So I kind of did make myself think like, you really better get something out of this prep time other than just wasted time. And so then it made me think of the story. But also, yeah, I mean, I'm always laughing. I'm laughing at I'm making fun of things that I do because I think that they're silly, and I've swallowed this really misogynistic culture that we live in, and I kind of play by its rules. That enrages me, and so then I sometimes will write things that I find cathartic.
And the irony of all of this is that you're preparing for an event that's going to pair you forever with the one person who is going to promise to love you no matter what.
Exactly. I know the irony of that was just so rich to me and funny.
And it is. It's very funny.
Yeah.
Another very funny voice in the book, and my favorite character in the book, and I think one that you have a lot of affection for, is Ruby.
Yeah.
Ruby is the main character, the protagonist in the title story, Big Time.
Yeah.
And she has this, the premise is just, it's fabulous. So tell us who Ruby is, and then I want you to introduce us to Ruby the way that we as readers are introduced to her.
Amazing. Okay, so this book, like a lot of short story collections, it does that thing where there's like a super long fat one at the end where you're like, ugh, but it has to, that has to be really good. So you might as well start with that one, because if they were like betting on it enough to make it the title, it should be good. It is my favorite one. Ruby is she's an actress from 1941 who's on the cusp of breaking through, and she is woke for 1941, and she basically gets a magical thing happens where she's sort of thrown into present day Hollywood, and she has to make it today.
And it actually happens on the set of a movie. She's filming a scene, and she is in a fighter jet.
Yes, she's filming a dogfight scene. It's something where she's like in the RAF in this movie, and she's in the cockpit, and she's in like a hurricane or something, and she accidentally pulls the wrong lever.
Yep.
And flies into the future and wakes up on Venice Beach, and goes straight to Universal Studios, and it is changed, and she just has to try to make it.
And you're right, she's still doing the same thing she's always been trying to do, which is to make it. And you described her, who was the actress was it Barbara Stanwyck?
Yeah, Barbara Stanwyck, and I think of Barbara Stanwyck, and I think of my grandmother, Pearl, just because I've always loved Barbara Stanwyck and her movies, and I think of my grandmother and her early experience and how rough it was, and so I just find it really interesting to sort of contrast those people who had really, really harder Scrabble upbringings with my life, which feels really cushy now. Yeah.
Well, and like you said, she's sort of woke for the 40s, but she is intimately familiar with the casting couch, has absolutely no qualms about, and so she's shocking, but in the way refreshing when we get into the 21st century.
Yeah.
Every one of these characters always has to establish their bona fides, and that voice gets it. You go back, it's not a childhood event, it's from the womb. So why don't you read us, Ruby's introduction from In Utero?
Totally.
What it was like there.
Totally, and I can say, if anyone else out there is a big Barbara Stanwyck fan, there are these biographies of her. The first volume is called Steel True. It's like 1,000 pages. It doesn't even go to Double Indemnity. And in the beginning of her early life is so dark. I've never read anything darker. I will just say that it's like when she was 3, I think her mom was pregnant and kicked by a horse and died on a trolley in front of her, okay? So anywho, I read that, and then I thought about this kind of stuff. Let's get the bio out of the way. In July of 1917, I get squished out in a shit mining town called Beaver Falls. The medical community may say it's impossible, but I remember life inside my mother's womb. It was toasty and humid, as it tends to be inside a person, and there I was, floating in goo and sucking on this little tube. It was a pretty boring routine, goo tube, and I just remember thinking, I have to get out of here. I have to get something going. Next thing I know, I'm shooting through a tunnel the size of a walnut, and then it gets windy, and out of nowhere, this big hairy lug's got me by the ankles, and he's smacking my ass. He could have done it again, too, if he'd ever bothered to call me. Oh, yeah, this is mine, yeah.
And this is mine.
Yeah.
And this, what I loved about it when we first talked about it was that you talked about this drive to get out, and just the idea that she had this drive. She had to get out of this deadbeat womb and make something out of her life.
Totally. I know. I love that win at any cost drive that some people have. I'm just amazed by it. I think it's fascinating. And the womb thing, it's funny. I feel like something that probably stuck in my mind was I remember learning something about Genghis Khan when he was born. He was born holding a clot of his mother's blood in his hand, and they had to like rip this black clot out of his hand, and I was like, that's amazing.
As a history teacher, I can neither confirm nor deny, but let's not let the facts get in the way of a great story. You said to me that Ruby is, she is shocking to her roommates. She's shocking to the casting people. She's shocking to everybody. And you say she's redeemable because her heart's in the right place. But do you also feel like, I feel like the swath that she cuts through the world that she gets dropped into, that there's something about her, just the fact that she just doesn't give a shit, that is really refreshing. Is there something that we have to learn from Ruby, who comes to us from the 40s?
I mean, for me, I have used, I didn't call that character Ruby, but that voice has been in my head for a really long time, and I've used that as a sort of like pep-up mechanism to kind of like, motivate me when, I feel really whiny about different things, and I think, how would a person with that outlook, how would they react? And actually, it's always been really like fortifying and kind of motivating to kind of like goad myself. And yeah, I think that she's, like she can say a lot of the crazy stuff that she says because she does have this heart of gold. Her heart is in the right place, and that's how I get away with the little dance that she has to dance in terms of being from 1941 today.
And, I have to say that of anybody, who was born, you were born, you said 1985?
Yeah.
1985. You capture that voice, which is from, another, really, 50 years before you were born, and you capture it beautifally. You really just nail it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Weiss. You could do, if you just like, oh yeah, I know, Matt.
It's fine. I hear it all the time.
It's like, if you like that stuff, and I love noir fiction, and I love noir movies, and if you watch a lot, you just watch a lot, and then like, you can do it, because it's not, I didn't invent that. I'm just copying something I like.
There is something, you do that with not just that genre, you do it with many different genres. And actually, let's talk a little bit about that. When I asked you about your process, and every writer I've ever known has a process, and you can tell us what yours is, but you said to me something I thought was so interesting. You said, I don't think of it as writing. If I think of it as writing, it's just gonna knock me out of my groove right away. It's just work. I'm just working. But you are writing, right? So first, how do you do this? Most of us, when we're funny, we actually use the term quick-witted, right? You come up with something. It's a line. You get a zinger. And you have to sit down every day and be funny. That sounds so hard. What do you do? What's it look like?
Totally. It is work. And so, one thing is, when you have time. You have a lot of time. So you're sitting there and you give yourself time. So you don't have to be funny in 1 second. You have time. And I think that it's just, I'm just thinking of like the things where I've been, actually, yeah, what was scary was when I was at the Onion and at Colbert, and you would have to write something and it was due in 2 hours. Mm. And so like, you have 2 hours, so you don't have to come up with a hilarious thing in the next minute, but that's actually not, that still was a scary amount of time.
And failing at funny writing is different from failing at other kinds of writing to me, because there's something that feels so exposed about trying to be funny and failing. And, we talked about Johnny Carson when we were back in the green room, which is not green. I did not know that. You've been in other ones. Are they generally green, or is that just a name?
They're not. I know.
They were named for a guy.
I know. I've been in one where they definitely had one green wall, but otherwise they're not green.
It's disappointing to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, though, we talked about Johnny Carson, and you remember his kind of classic, his golf swing that he would do. Some people remember this when he had a joke and it didn't land, and he would just do that, and then somehow it was like a reset, and it was funny anyway. But you don't have the opportunity to do that when you're writing or when you're writing for somebody else. So you sit down and do you run it by people?
Oh,
are there people
well, that's the big part, right? So I come up with stuff, and I'm my first reader, so it's like I am the first person reading this. So numero uno, do I think this is interesting? Am I bored? If I think it's interesting and fun, then I play with it. And then my first reader is my brilliant, hilarious husband, who's also a writer-performer.
Okay. I assume.
And so that's my secret sauce. So I mean, I show it to him, and I'm like, "Is this funny?" And usually I am standing there watching him, and it's horrible. And I try to leave the room, and then he says yes or no, and he's only been wrong once. Every time he's so right.
That's not a bad batting average.
Yeah, no.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
exactly.
was worth all those workouts before the wedding because it's so useful. But you are writing, and this is literature, right? And so one of the things I love about the work that you do is that you seem to move so effortlessly among different genres. And there's one instance in The Snowman where you fuse two of them. I mean, you did the Agatha Christie style mystery, and then we've got the cinema noir, but in literary form. In The Snowman, where you're fusing two different styles, what are they?
Yes, the Snowman, which I steal the title The Snowman from that amazing lyrical Raymond Briggs cartoon called The Snowman from the 80s. It's so awesome if you haven't seen it. And so I write, I sort of set it up in that style, and so that's not a written piece, that short movie, but it's just, it's very innocent, and it's sort of innocent and lyrical.
There's a Christmas wonder sort of category.
Yes,
right?
Christmas, yeah.
Wide-eyed, magical, and even though the kid lives in the 21st century, he's clearly from the 19th century, right?
Exactly.
So little Elijah Honeycutt, and just every kind of cliche that you could have to establish just his wonderful innocence.
Yeah.
And then he creates, and somehow it's magically animated like Frosty, right?
Exactly.
This snowman who's not like Frosty.
Exactly. He creates a magical snow friend,
Right.
and they fly away together on a magical adventure.
And let's not talk about him. Let's share this adventure, just a little bit of it.
Right.
And the part that I had forgotten when I could you maybe next book do a large print?
Oh.
That would be wonderful. So anyway, why don't we start out with I dash downstairs and onto the lawn, and I think you'll know where to finish up.
Okie dokie.
Right at the top of the
Okay,
next page.
sweet.
I dash downstairs.
Indeed. I dashed downstairs and out onto the lawn, sure that I was dreaming. But there my friend still stood, holding out a snowy hand, as if to invite me on a wonderful adventure. I took it, and, wonder of wonders, the two of us floated right off the ground and into the air. Soon we were flying together over the countryside, and what a marvelous sensation it was. As fluffy white clouds whooshed past underneath us, I looked ahead and saw the glittering lights of the city. We flew lower, and I began to make out the shape of roads and buildings below. It looked like we were flying over a highway and then a strip mall. Ever so softly, we glided down to the parking lot. I looked around and saw a vape shop and a 24-hour mini-mart. "Got any cash on you?" the snowman asked. Goodness gracious, were my ears deceiving me? Had the snowman really spoken? Until now, my frosty friend hadn't said a word. My eyes went wide as saucers, and I clasped my hands in delight. "Why, Mr. Snowman!" "Yeah, look, call me Ken. Spot me a 20? I gotta take care of something real quick." I was naked underneath my pajamas and had no pockets. "Sorry, I don't have any money."
And scene. So.
Thank you.
And then eventually they end up. I mean, the snowman is just a classic degenerate, and it's this sort of voyeuristic down. He gets drunk. He shoplifts some flowers for an ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
He goes to her place. There's another guy. The snowman almost gets beat up.
Yeah.
He lies about the kid being his nephew to try to gain her sympathy, and then he forgets the kid's name, which he made up in the first place. And the story ends. Well, I'll just tell you, I kind of have this sort of voice, almost a Ruby-era voice in my head, of like a producer or, I don't know, an editor saying to you, "Now, Jen, kid, we love the snowman. We love the dirty snowman. I love the part where he pulls the smokes out of nowhere and the kid thinks, isn't he naked? But Jen, does he have to jerk off to the kid's mother's picture at the end of the story?
Right.
Do we have to go there?"
Right.
And You told me when we were talking that when you were the head writer at The Onion, or when you've been writing at Colbert, that you always said to your colleagues, "Don't come to me if you want to know whether it's over the line."
I didn't say that. I did have that reputation, but I would always be happy to field it. But I did get that reputation.
My point being that you didn't always know what was over the line.
Yeah.
Or at least, were there any times when you wrote something that just you kind of wished you could pull back, or maybe it didn't age well, or it didn't land well?
I wish I said yes, but no. Actually, I
That's
usually
great.
like where the line was, but I got in trouble. I've definitely gotten in. It was never trouble, but it was like something that people would laugh at. Oh, we can't air that. Oh, we can't publish
I feel
that.
like if you don't occasionally get that answer, then you're not pushing hard enough. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And while I wouldn't say that it's equivalent to John Lewis's famous Good Trouble, it's a different kind of good trouble, and I'm glad that you get into it sometimes.
Totally. You know what, though, specifically with the end of that story, I wish that I could figure out a different ending to that one. And my editor did suggest cutting that ending.
I didn't talk to
actually,
your editor.
He did. That was the only thing he ever put his hand on the scale with. And then I was like, but Thomas agreed with me. I was like, it has to happen that way.
No,
So.
Jen, I'm glad you didn't cut it out.
Thank you, Matt.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So you spent a lot of time writing for Stephen Colbert.
Yeah.
And putting words into the mouth of someone, as you said, who has an established voice that people know. Mm-hmm. You didn't have to do that with this book. How is it different?
It is so different. The biggest thing for me was coming from writing stuff for The Late Show, sketches, monologue jokes. There's no fat. It's really, really joke to joke to joke. And so the pacing is super fast. And fiction requires so much. Just to hear a story, there's all of this interstitial tissue, all of this world-building tissue you have to do that in a script would just be fat. And so when you're writing a story, you'll have the beats that you're sort of getting to, but you then have to be like, okay, at this point, someone should just, we need to take a breather, so where are they sitting by a lake? Okay, so a fish needs to jump out of the lake and the sun glints off the fish. It's pointless. At first I was like, why am I writing that? It's so boring and who cares? But you have to remind people of the reality of the story to keep this magic trick of believing this fake thing is happening going. And sidebar, Busis, I remember telling this, one of my best friends, David Busis, who's brilliant, he's a novelist. He went to Iowa, and Yale, and anywho. But when I was starting to write fiction, I told him, and I remember, I think you thought I sounded so dumb because I was like, I didn't know you had to pause and do all these moments where you do this meaningless stuff just to make a story go. So for me, coming from TV or The Onion, that was the thing.
So
that I
some
didn't
of the things that you learned in English class at Shady Side.
Wow.
A little pitch?
Wow.
Maybe?
Sure.
Okay. I'll let them know. They'll be thrilled. So this work has exposed you to a lot of people that a lot of us know. I mean, the names that show up on the back of your book, and you're not a name dropper at all. But just in talking about your life, Tina Fey's name comes up, and obviously Stephen's. Obviously these are people we know. Anything you can tell us about anybody? Can you dish for just a second?
Oh, yeah, I know. I should have this more teed up. Well, I can. So we did this thing on The Late Show that I pitched that was parodying Goop, which is Gwyneth Paltrow's lifestyle blog, and it's Gwyneth, not Gwyneth. I learned that.
Oh.
They told me that. There was something called Covetton House where Stephen had his own lifestyle brand, and Stephen came up with that name. And one time when she came to do it, because she was cool and she wanted to play with us, because she's smart, she knows it's fun to just make fun of it. But she thought that something was. She just was like. There was something where she was really openly like, I don't think this is funny.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't terribly friendly the way she said it. So that was kind of awkward. And then another thing, I don't know if anyone knows this very, very cool rap duo, Run the Jewels. We used to do this bit at Colbert where Stephen would have a hokey, cute song, and then Run the Jewels would crash the song. And so I would write the hokey song and the really sort of gritty rap that Run the Jewels would then rap with Stephen, and I had to help them.
You would write the rap?
I would write the rap.
Okay.
And I would go down to the stage and help them learn the rap. And one of the guys, it's Killer Mike and LP, and LP was like this, like basically the scansion doesn't track. This is sort of bad. I didn't even know what scansion meant. And I was like, oh my
I don't
god,
know what it means.
It means like the sort of the rhythm of the line.
Ah, I gotcha.
But on the fly, I had to sort of like redo the rap with them. That was scary. I know it's not a good one because you guys don't know Run the Jewels. But
No, but you know
Gwyneth
what,
Paltrow was mean.
But getting rap lessons from Killer Mike on the spot, that's an LP, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
We have to wrap this up, so this is going to be our last question. And because we're in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburghers particularly love their Pittsburghers, they love when Pittsburghers get famous, and you're kind of Pittsburgh famous now in my mind. But let me ask you this. You drop a lot of little, I call them, I kind of feel like love notes to Pittsburgh in there. You have one of your characters, the aforementioned Molly, the narrator, her family tragically loses their hands in a rafting accident out at Dimple Rock in Ohio.
Yep, out there on the Youghiogheny.
Poor little Elijah, when he's shivering cold on the doorstep of the girlfriend, the snowman's girlfriend, and gets a cigarette-smelling Steelers sweatshirt. And there's more, right? Ruby, born in Beaver Falls.
Right.
So first of all, that's intentional, right? You're meaning to send a little note to us.
Yeah.
And how does being a Pittsburgher, do you think, inform the work that you do?
Well, I love that. I mean, they're totally little love notey Easter eggs. I love thinking that anyone who's from Pittsburgh or southwestern Pennsylvania will see these and be like, she's got to be from southwestern PA because there's a million weird, why does it say Etna? Like, why would anyone say Etna or Moon Township somewhere? I mean, one, I use this in The Onion all the time because you had to like have the date stamp of like, you know, the where, when, and so I would always be like Monroeville, Moon, Etna, Plum.
Right,
I
I've
just would
seen
like, right. So that's just like laziness because I was like, okay, I know those places. But I mean, one, it's verisimilitude and it's lying to someone to try to make them believe your fake thing. And so if you can ever get that real feel, real smell, I know this place, and I know Pittsburgh, and I know stuff that I effortlessly know is real, and so I can kind of inject a little bit of real feel. And then, yeah, it just delights me because I also just love thinking about and talking about Pittsburgh.
Did you write my favorite Onion Chiron on the Onion News Network ever? Pittsburgh tops list of America's most listed cities.
That's so good. No, I didn't.
Well, you are at the top of our list. Thank you for coming home.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you for making us proud, and thank you for making us laugh, because God knows we need it. Everybody, Jen Spyra,
Matt.
big time, buy the book.
Thank you.
Do we leave now? Okay, we'll go.
Lights will come on, buy the book, join the signing line. Jen Spyra.